My wife laughed at the party, a sharp, glittering sound that cut through the warm Marbella air. "I could dump you right now," she declared, her voice loud enough for the circle of our friends to hear. Her hand, heavy with the diamonds I'd bought her, rested on the arm of Ricardo Vargas, a man whose smile was as slick as his oiled back hair. The group tittered nervously. They were all waiting for my reaction, expecting me to placate her, to smile weakly and play along with her cruel little joke. Her eyes, full of a triumphant, mocking light, dared me. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, letting the ice clink against the glass. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. I met her gaze across the flickering poolside lanterns and kept my voice level, devoid of the emotion she so desperately wanted to provoke. "Go ahead," I replied. Her smile didn't just falter, it shattered. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a mask of confusion and shock. The silence that followed was absolute, a heavy blanket smothering the party's cheerful hum. She thought it was the start of a fight. She thought it was a challenge. She had no idea it was the end. But to understand the weight of those two words, you have to understand the 3 months that preceded them. Let me take you back. Our life, on the surface, was perfect. I am Javier, an architect. I don't build flashy glass boxes for transient celebrities. I restore beautiful, old buildings in Madrid, giving them new life while honoring their history. My work is methodical, patient, and successful. It afforded us a life Elena had always dreamed of. We had the sprawling apartment overlooking the Parque del Retiro, the art collection she curated with my money, and this very villa in Marbella for summers. We met 10 years ago. She was working at a small gallery, full of passion for art, and, I thought, for life. I was captivated by her fire. I built an empire for us, brick by brick, project by project, believing I was building a fortress for our shared future. The first signs of trouble were like hairline fractures in a foundation, easy to ignore until the whole structure groans. It began with her friends. My friends were academics, fellow architects, old colleagues, people who talked about ideas and history. Her new friends, like Ricardo, talked only about money, how much they had, how much they were making, how much things cost. Her conversations shifted from art to assets. She started making little comments, sharp as needles. "Javier, you're so traditional. Ricardo just bought a yacht on a whim." Or, "Why do you still drive that old Mercedes?" "It's not a classic, it's just old," she'd say it with a laugh, a little joke, but the barb was always there, coated in sweetness. She began to see me not as the man who built her world, but as a limitation on the even grander world she now coveted. I saw the disrespect growing in her eyes, a slow creeping ivy that was choking the love I thought we had. I started to feel like a utility, a provider of a lifestyle she was simultaneously enjoying and ashamed of. The breaking point, the moment the hairline fractures split wide open, came on a Tuesday. I was supposed to be in Barcelona for 3 days, finalizing a contract for a hotel restoration. I finished early. A deep, gnawing unease had been coiling in my gut for weeks, and the thought of surprising her, of seeing a flash of genuine delight on her face, was a temptation I couldn't resist. I landed in Madrid and took a taxi straight home, a bouquet of her favorite peonies on the seat beside me. The apartment was quiet. I found her in our walk-in closet, her back to me. She was on the phone, her voice low and conspiratorial. I paused in the doorway, hidden by the shadows of the hall. "No, Marta, he has no idea," she was saying, followed by a tinkling laugh that sounded obscene in its secrecy. "He's just so predictable. He goes to work, he comes home. He thinks as long as the bills are paid and I have a new handbag, I'm happy." A pause. I could hear the tinny voice of her friend on the other end. My heart began to beat a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. "Ricardo is different. He's exciting. He sees me." Another pause, and this was the part that turned my blood to ice. "Of course, I can't leave Javier yet. Not until Ricardo solidifies his new venture. You don't leave a bank until you have another one lined up. I've been moving a little extra into my art fund each month. Javier doesn't even notice. He's too busy with his dusty old buildings." I didn't move. I couldn't. The peonies in my hands suddenly felt like a bundle of weeds. A cold, clarifying rage washed over me, so pure and absolute it felt like a religious experience. My first instinct was to burst in, to confront her, to watch the lies crumble on her face. But what would that accomplish? A screaming match? Tears? A temporary, hollow victory? No. Betrayal this calculated, this contemptuous, did not deserve a passionate response. It deserved a methodical demolition. I quietly pulled out my phone, switched it to record, and held it steady, capturing the last minute of her conversation as she detailed her financial planning. It was all the evidence I would need. I backed away as silently as I had arrived, left the flowers on the console table in the hall, and walked out of the apartment. I went to a hotel. That night, sitting in a sterile room with a view of a city that no longer felt like mine, I didn't break down. I made a plan. The woman I had loved was a ghost. The person living in my home was a parasite. And you don't argue with a parasite. You starve it. The next morning, I was in the office of my lawyer, Miguel. He's a friend, a man whose family I've known for 30 years. I played him the recording. He listened, his face impassive, then took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He didn't offer condolences. He simply asked, "What do you want to do, Javier?" "I want to protect what I've built," I said. "And then I want to be free of her." The following 3 months were a masterclass in quiet efficiency. While Elena slept in my bed, shopped with my money, and laughed about my naivety, Miguel and I worked. We invoked clauses in my business contracts, restructuring ownership into trusts that were untouchable in a divorce. We audited every account. As she had so proudly boasted, she had been skimming, moving money into a personal account she thought I didn't know about. We let her. We documented every transfer, every withdrawal. It was the rope she was gleefully braiding for her own hanging. I set up a new, smaller apartment for myself under a corporate lease. I moved sentimental items out of our home piece by piece. A painting my father had given me, my grandfather's watch, photo albums from before she was in my life. She never noticed their absence. She was too busy noticing new shoes in shop windows. I had to live a double life. At home, I played the part of the slightly distant, overworked husband she believed me to be. I was quiet, observant. I listened to her talk about her day, about the vapid accomplishments of her vapid friends. I would nod and say, "That's nice, dear," my mind miles away, walking through legal documents and financial statements. It was the most difficult acting job of my life, maintaining that facade of normalcy while my world was being methodically dismantled and rebuilt on a new, solitary foundation. Her arrogance grew in direct proportion to my silence. She mistook my quiet calculation for weakness, my emotional withdrawal for defeat. She became bolder in her disrespect. A month before the party, we had dinner with some of my oldest clients. Elena, drunk on expensive champagne, started telling a story about my obsession with work, framing it as a charming quirk that was actually a pathetic inability to enjoy life. He'd rather spend a weekend poring over dusty blueprints than fly to Ibiza with me and Ricardo, she'd said with a sigh, placing a theatrical hand on the arm of the client's wife. He's a wonderful provider, of course. A very stable foundation. She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. Everyone at the table shifted uncomfortably. It was a public humiliation, designed to diminish me, to elevate her in the eyes of her new, glamorous world. I just smiled a thin smile. I let her think she was winning. Every little jab, every dismissive comment, was just another nail she was hammering into her own coffin. I was no longer a husband. I was an architect planning the most precise and devastating demolition of his life. The annual summer party at our Marbella villa was her main event of the year. It was her chance to play the grande dame, the effortless hostess in a home paid for by a man she secretly despised. This year, she insisted on inviting her entire new circle, including Ricardo Vargas. "We need some new energy, Javier," she'd said, waving a dismissive hand. "Your friends are so serious." I agreed to everything. I let her spend a fortune on caterers, on a new wardrobe, on decorations. I wanted the stage to be perfectly set. I wanted a full audience for the final act. The day of the party, I was unnaturally calm. I watched her direct the staff, a queen in her temporary kingdom. She wore a shimmering silver dress that must have cost a fortune, a beautiful, expensive trap. When she kissed me before the guests arrived, her lips were cold. "Try to have fun tonight, darling," she whispered. "Don't be so boring." The dramatic irony was so thick I could taste it. The party was in full swing by 10 o'clock. The air smelled of jasmine and salt. Music drifted over the infinity pool, which reflected the star-dusted sky. Elena was holding court near the bar, Ricardo a permanent fixture at her side. She was laughing, her head thrown back, basking in the attention. I watched them from the terrace. I saw the way his hand lingered on the small of her back. I saw the shared, secret smiles. They thought they were being so clever, so discreet. They were children playing a game whose rules they didn't understand. I waited for the perfect moment. It came just after midnight. She had gathered a group, the core of her new friends and a few of my old ones who were now trapped in the social crossfire. She was telling a story, her voice animated, her gestures grand. And then she delivered the line, the one she'd probably been rehearsing. Javier is so dependable. Too dependable. I could dump you right now for a little excitement. The laughter, the dare in her eyes, the expectant silence. It was time. Go ahead, I said. The words dropped into the party like stones into a perfectly still pond. Her frozen smile was a work of art, a perfect porcelain mask cracking in real time. Her eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline, but everyone was staring at me. At her. What did you say? She stammered, her voice a fraction of its former volume. I said, go ahead. I repeated, my tone still conversational. I took a step forward, into the circle of light. In fact, I encourage it. Dump me. Be with Ricardo. I gestured with my glass towards him. He took an involuntary step back, his own slick smile vanishing. You two clearly have something special. All those lunches in Madrid, the weekend in Ibiza you thought I didn't know about. The jewelry he bought you with the money you siphoned from my accounts. By all means, start your exciting new life together. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Elena's face was now a dead, chalky white. Javier, don't do this here, she hissed, a venomous whisper. Do what, Elena? Tell the truth. I kept my voice calm, letting the facts do the work. I thought you wanted excitement. This is exciting, isn't it? A new chapter. Of course, it will be a slightly different chapter than you imagined. I looked directly at her. The divorce papers were filed this morning. My lawyer will be in touch. Your things, the ones you actually paid for yourself, which, as it turns out, is not very much, have been packed and delivered to your mother's apartment in Malaga. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. A tremor started in her hands. Oh, and the joint accounts have been frozen pending the divorce settlement, I added, as if it were an afterthought. The credit cards you have were canceled about an hour ago, so if you were planning on checking into a hotel tonight, you might have a problem. I turned my gaze to Ricardo Vargas, who looked like a man desperately searching for an exit. Ricardo, I assume you'll be taking care of her? After all, you're the exciting 1-inch. Ricardo paled. He looked from my face to Elena's crumbling one. He cleared his throat. This is between you two, he mumbled, before detaching himself from her side and melting into the crowd. He was a predator, but a cowardly one, unwilling to fight for a prize that had just been devalued to zero. The sight of him abandoning her so swiftly and completely was almost more devastating than anything I had said. That was the moment she finally broke. A strangled sob escaped her lips. The magnificent hostess, the Queen of Marbella, was suddenly just a woman in a too expensive dress, utterly alone in a crowd of people. I didn't wait for the tears or the screaming. I had said what needed to be said. My part was over. I placed my empty whiskey glass on a nearby table, gave a slight, formal nod to the stunned onlookers, and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked through the villa I had bought for her, out the front door I would never enter again, and got into the car that was waiting for me. As we drove away, I could finally hear the shouting begin. But it was distant, like a storm passing over another town. It had nothing to do with me anymore. The aftermath was exactly as Miguel and I had predicted. The week after the party was a deluge of frantic, unhinged communication. Hundreds of texts, dozens of voicemails. They cycled through the 5 stages of her grief with breathtaking speed. First, rage, threats, insults, accusations. Then, denial. Messages pretending the party never happened, asking when I was coming to my senses. Then came bargaining. Promises to change, to be the wife I always wanted, to give up her new friends. This was followed by a deep, pathetic depression, tearful voicemails left at 3 in the morning. And finally, when none of it worked because I never once replied, there was a bitter, resentful acceptance. Her friends, The ones who had laughed at her jokes at my expense vanished. Without my money to fund her lifestyle, she was no longer an asset. She was a liability. Ricardo Vargas blocked her number. He was last seen trying to impress another wealthy man's wife in Monaco. Elena tried to fight the divorce, of course. She hired a shark of a lawyer who promised her the world. But Miguel was prepared. We presented the prenuptial agreement she had signed without reading, the bank statements detailing her secret art fund, the recording of her phone call, and sworn affidavits from 2 of the caterers at the party whom she had stiffed on their final payment after her cards were declined. Her case collapsed. The judge was not impressed. She was left with a pittance, as stipulated in the prenup, for infidelity. Her lawyer dropped her when she could no longer pay his fees. The unraveling was systematic. The villa was sold. The apartment in Madrid, which was legally mine before the marriage, remained mine. The art she had collected was sold to cover her legal debts, as it was purchased with joint funds during the marriage. Mutual friends would give me updates, not out of malice, but with a kind of bewildered pity. Elena was living with her mother in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. She'd had to get a job, an entry-level position at a real estate agency, selling holiday rentals to tourists. The woman who once scoffed at my classic Mercedes was now taking the bus. The designer clothes and handbags were sold off, one by one, to pay for rent and groceries. Her world had shrunk from the grand vistas of Marbella to the 4 small walls of her past. A year later, I am sitting on the terrace of my Madrid apartment. The air is warm, and the city hums below me. I had the entire place redecorated. Her style, all sharp edges and cold, modern art, is gone. It's warmer now, filled with books, architectural drawings, and the comfortable furniture I always preferred. My work is thriving. The hotel in Barcelona is a triumph, praised for its sensitive restoration. I am respected. I am at peace. I sometimes see her, not in person, but in the periphery of my old life. A friend mentioned seeing her at a bar, looking older, her face hard with a bitterness that had settled deep into her features. She was drinking cheap wine and complaining loudly to anyone who would listen about how her life had been stolen from her. She still doesn't understand. Nothing was stolen. It was forfeited. She traded a life of loyalty and love for the promise of something more exciting, and ended up with nothing. I feel no joy in her misery, but I feel no pity, either. I feel only the quiet, solid satisfaction of a foundation that has been tested and held. I built a beautiful life, and when I discovered it was rotten inside, I tore it down and built another, stronger one, just for me. And it is beautiful,